Oh, hi, this is Rob Kramars, president and founder of Intelliversity. We're here today with Stroma Medical Corporation, Doug Daniels, the chief executive officer, and Greg Homer, the chairman and chief scientific officer. And we've been chatting about what's working and not working in the raising of the funds of for their company. I just want to remind you, this is not a solicitation for you to buy any stock in their company. It's not an offer to sell securities. This is a training video for entrepreneurs and investors. And they've in the break, come up with a very interesting topic, which I want to spend a few minutes on here, which is the exit. Because investors will always tell an entrepreneur, you've got to have an exit. You've got to have a way to sell the company, or we're not interested in investing in you. And you have to be able to sell it fairly quickly. 3 years, 4 years, 5 years tops. What I want you to do is comment on how you treat that requirement that investors will shove in your face, that you must have an exit for your company. What's your answer to that?
I think that it's got to be a balanced approach. First of all, I think that investors push it hard because the assumption is that entrepreneurs are too attached to their companies, and it's going to be difficult for them to exit. So they're kind of trying to shift the ground to make it balance out.
Right.
But I think that both investors and founders should ultimately want the same thing: build a real company. If you build a real company, I mean, big businesses now have become nothing but financiers and distributors, because historically their R&D doesn't pay off. They don't tend to be great at home growing creative applications.
Right.
And so they need to look outside of their companies for real vision. And that's comes in the form of startups and entrepreneurs.
Right.
They buy those companies. More and more companies are spending less on R&D internally and more on acquisitions, and it's turning out well.
But your point that you made earlier was that if you focus on your exit exclusively, you're not on building a real company, you're not going to ever reach an exit.
That's right.
You're not going to have enough value.
You're going to spend too much money on the sizzle, too much time and energy and money on the sizzle, and not enough on the steak. And so, our feeling is that you want to build a real company, and in that process, you're going to get acquisition offers. Because the truth of the matter is, for really good companies, the pipeline is always dry. It's hard for them to get money, it's hard for them to have a good idea, it's hard to execute it well, and the few that remain standing, it's sort of like last comic standing, right? The few that remain standing, they're going to get acquisition offers. And what the investors are saying, I believe, is we want to know that when that happens, you're prepared to let go. This is not your baby anymore. This belongs to all of us. Right. That's right. And you have to be prepared to let go. But at the same time, I think the entrepreneur would be mistaken if what they're hearing is, we're building something solely to sell it, because you'll have a beautiful box with nothing in it, and nobody's going to buy it.
Okay, understood.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, all of us should be building businesses that are literally getting to the point where they are standalone on their own. So, the key challenge is to build a sustainable business and a sustainable business opportunity that literally you can run irregardless of whether you have additional capital coming in or not. You want to build a business that's solid so that you can, in essence, keep that business going for the long term. Now, with that said, the objective is to sell the company.
Well, wait a second. We can be innovative in finance just as you're innovative in your product. So there are innovative ways to structure the deal so that it doesn't matter how long it takes to exit, but the investors still profit.
That's right.
That's right.
I call that a rolling exit. There are ways to structure participation in revenue and cash flow.
That's right.
There are ways to structure taking multiple acquisitional, really licensing opportunities out of the company while keeping the core company. And you're building really a platform. And the platform stays around for a really long time, but you let pieces of it be acquired.
Yeah, and I've done something similar to that, Rob, in the last entity that I had. Literally using the different licensing deals that we had, do a series of different licensing deals, keep the core technology in the company, and then simply do licensing deals, which in essence funded the mainstream business.
So we at Intelliversity are very much in favor of licensing deals, so that it allows a company to pay back its investors while at the same time and bring in a lot of cash for further development, while at the same time keeping the platform in the company for development of further products and further markets. So you get the best of both worlds. You satisfy your investors, but you're really building a core company for the long term. Does that apply to you guys, to Stroma?
Very much so.
Is there a piece of you that you could license out and keep the core?
Very much so. We've developed, for example, it's important that the patient's head be stabilized for our treatment because we want the eye to move as little as possible. So if you're talking about Z direction, meaning the eye remaining on the same depth plane, you do that through stabilization of the head. You also reduce X and Y movement by stabilizing the head. Now the eye can still move independent of the head, but by stabilizing the head you help a lot of it. And then you've got issues of stabilizing the head, like a focal point, things like that. That's why we use an animated focal point. It's easier to fix your gaze on it. So we've created proprietary means of head stabilization. Well, this is very useful beyond our technology. There's all kinds of treatments of skin and face and hair and everything else where it's very important to stabilize the head and have the patient still be comfortable. This is a perfect example of something where beyond our usage, it means nothing to us. This is a perfect way to license product and bring in outside revenue. It reduces the amount of money we have to raise. It shows investors that there's early revenue coming back even before our product use. We've got several of these kinds of things that we've developed for our product, but that aren't going to be solely restricted to our product.
Would you be open to creating a term sheet for investors that where they can actually participate in licensing events along the way?
Sure. Well, they would anyway. I think that any company should be reluctant to make royalty deals with investors just because the other investors who own equity, it's just skimming it off the top for them. I think that when you make royalties where the company is getting royalty income, that's great for them to get it, and that it's best, I think, to keep, I mean, this is just my view, I think it's best to keep the investors then at the shareholder level rather than taking cash out of the company at the royalty level, because it kind of changes, the company then doesn't have as much flexibility about using income for operations, and I think that it's hard to foresee how that's going to play out.
Okay, but the other side of that argument is that if investors get their capital back at some point through licensing, royalties and participation in a licensing deal, then they're more likely to want to ride with you a longer period of time to get the home run.
Yes, and you certainly could do a deal that pays them out on their royalties, and then at that point they convert to either some lesser share, some continuing interest. We also had another situation come up where there's a strategic that's interested in buying us. And as part of it, they came in and looked at it and looked at who else had invested and said, well, what if we put money in the company and we also take out these investors? So that's another way that these things can come up. So yeah, there's a lot of ways that investors can be well protected.
Okay, good, great. So what do you have to teach other entrepreneurs who have a different kind of company about working with investors and courting investors?
Well, I think that the key is first have the infrastructure in place, have the fundamentals in place, so that when you're talking to the investors, they don't have to wonder, what your company is all about and have you done all the things that are necessary to say that this is going to be a real entity. I think that's extremely important on the core level. And then, it's a matter of being flexible because, frankly, we don't know what's going to ultimately pop for us as far as who's going to finance the company. Whether it's going to be angels, and you had mentioned royalties. There's royalty deals that no longer involve equity in the company. They basically take the royalties out over a period of time. There's a lot of different structures, and I think the key is know what you ultimately want to do, which is build an entity, but understand that there's a lot of different ways that you can structure the deal in order for it to be effective. It doesn't necessarily just have to be a plain vanilla deal.
Yeah, and by the way, royalty deals are very effective for certain kinds of companies which don't necessarily have an exit if they have a lot of cash flow.
That's right.
A royalty deal is basically a participation, but it's not a loan. That is to say, it's not a loan with fixed payments. You promise your investors to pay back a certain percentage of cash flow, and if the cash flow is higher, they're getting more. If the cash flow is less, they get less to a certain multiple of their original investment, 2 or 3 times. Those are really exciting structures for certain kinds of companies that don't expect an exit in a few years.
And because there's less risk associated with it, they expect a little less upside. That leaves more for the company.
Now, is it possible that you are actually talking to the wrong kind of investors?
No, I think that we could have, and we were talking to the wrong kind of investors throughout the process. You know, we started out with the more traditional venture funds, and you know, again, their model is very different now than it was 2, 3, 4 years ago. So I think that, you know, knowing that or trying to understand a little bit more about the people that you're talking to is extremely important in the process.
You've got a product that makes the average brown-eyed person into a blue-eyed celebrity.
Right.
So wouldn't your natural audience be people that are interested in fashion and glamour and prestige and looks and you know, it wouldn't be your classic closeted, that's not the right word. It's your
Yeah,
classic
it's a little risky.
bookkeeper kind of investor
Sure.
who's just looking at the numbers.
Here's the problem, though. We're dealing with it's ultimately still a medical device. It still has to go through regulatory approvals. It still has to go through quality control.
Right.
So, you know, it's fine to say, yeah, that's, you know, once you have a product that's all approved and out there, then yeah, it's a great acquisition target for a cosmetics company, no question. But when you're talking about building it up, you need people who understand what the risks and rewards are in that business.
Maybe, but I'm thinking there might be other kinds of investors who are
Yes.
not your professional investors,
Yep.
who would be considered more casual, part-time investors, but be fascinated by what you're doing. And on that note, we're signing off. This is IntelliVersity with Stroma Medical Corporation. We'll change your brown eyes to blue. And if there's any questions, please remember to email us. Thank you very much.